Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. You might want to prepare for this one by grabbing a snack or putting it on in the background while you do some errands or whatnot, because it's going to be kind of a long one. So today we are going to be talking about Project Stargate. Basically, I am going to explain what military-grade psychics have to do with AI. Starting off, what is/was Project Stargate? Project Stargate was an experiment that the CIA, SRI, DIA orchestrated to see what military use could be made from psychics. That's from Area 52, 2023. Project Stargate is now tied to a $500 billion AI infrastructure plan in the United States, Wikipedia contributors 2025. There were several resources that I could have used to back up this specific set of information. With the previous Project Stargate, I chose to use Area 52's YouTube video as my first resource because I used it to get into the research space around this topic. This also led me to look more into Ingo Swann, find more of the declassified documents, there are a lot, and remember some of my early school years. I found it to be a really good starting place. Also, I understand that Wikipedia is not the most accurate, especially as it comes to current events. However, this is information that you can back up through multiple sources. So, this is just the one that I found that seemed like it explained well enough. Let's go deeper. Going through AMP, ESP, remote viewing, Sunstreak, Ingo Swann, and his alleged warnings of aliens and the Cold War. Before we dive into everything with the AI stuff, I wanted to really dig into what the original Project Stargate was. Hopefully in doing so, it will develop a better understanding of how the old version is tied to the new version. AMP versus ESP. In one of the documents approved for release in 2003 is where we see the first use in this research of the abbreviation AMP, anomalous mental phenomena. In that they state the program is meant to identify how AMP works, find the usefulness and its limits, discover national security threats, develop countermeasures, improve operations, and integrate AMP with other intelligence sources, technology and assessment, and support activity office for ground forces, 1994. Another source I found, along with the YouTube video and presumably many more resources, reference this as ESP, extrasensory perception. The rest of this writing is available for purchase, but I'm just using it for this reference. It does also start the tie between the AI programs, stating the current administration announced plans for an AI initiative with the same codename as bizarre CIA operations from the Cold War era. Spencer 2025. Perhaps ESP is not yet understood sensitivity to subtle cues or the brain function as a computer processing information subconsciously. Perhaps those who are most sensitive print out slightly before or in parallel with distant events, thus appearing to be clairvoyant, but having calculated probabilities unconsciously from data gathered along the way, also unconsciously. Beaumont, 1982. The previous quote comes from a source that says that interest in researching ESP has not been a new phenomenon, though interest rates did rise prior to the time when research started picking up. Another declassified document says that the US had key research efforts into parapsychological and anomalous phenomena, AP or AMP, at different universities and medical centers from as far back as 1930. Directorate for Scientific and Technical Intelligence, Defense Intelligence Agency, 1993. CIA documents even show that Adolf Hitler reportedly had seers and astrologers during World War II. Binman, 2025. It's interesting nonetheless to see people try to make logical sense of the things we cannot understand. I do think sometimes we try too hard to understand things that either we aren't meant to know or are not ready to know. Remote viewing. The CIA defined remote viewing in one of the declassified documents as the acquisition and description by mental means of information blocked from ordinary perception by distance, shielding, or time. The benefits stated for remote viewing are that it is passive, inexpensive, and there is no known defense against it. This same resource also specifies ERV and CRV as two separate systems of conduction, aka techniques. ERV, extended remote viewing, is a system where the remote viewer prepares for the session through deep relaxation and focused attention. CRV, coordinate remote viewing, is a system where the viewer sticks to a rigid structure through several stages that correspond to increased contact with the designated site. Defense Intelligence Agency 2000. Last thing thing is this paper just has some cool illustrations alongside the information that I thought were worth pointing out, so you should definitely check out that source if you would like to see some of those. Other sources regarding remote viewing are available. I did not have the time or the energy to dig too deeply into them. One of them is 178 pages, one is 97, and the other is 7. If you would like to read them, they are as follows. 178 pages is the American Institutes for Research, 1995. 97 pages was Zarbo, 1992, and 7 pages was Not Available, 2003. I know for certain there is much more information regarding all of this, however, these are all the resources I used or found for this writing, and therefore the ones I provided. If you want to find more, you are always welcome and encouraged to do your own research, especially if you are looking to know more on this topic, because there is truly endless information to be found. Please keep in mind when watching, there is supposedly no specified number, but estimates range from 11 to 13 million pages of documents were declassified regarding Project Stargate. BBC Editors 2017. Due to this, I'm skimming the many documents I could find. For reference, I found 10 PDFs just from declassified documents, not including what may be referenced on any of the other websites, totaling just 570 pages. There's no plausible way for me to give a complete detailed rundown of everything there is when it's that much information, but I'll always try my best. Project Sunstreak. Project Sunstreak was a project underneath the encompassing Project Stargate. What Project Sunstreak did was study psychoenergetics. What that means is individuals that psychically interact with objects, locations, or events. They were researching 2 ways that can be done, either through psychokinesis, physical actions performed through mental power, or ESP, telepathy, and remote viewing, which they said could not be explained through any known sensory means. Defense Intelligence Agency 2000. Only a fraction of the human mind is currently used. Limitless mental capabilities are just waiting to be accepted, developed, and understood. McKelvey, 1988. Ingo Swann. We open the scene on Ingo Swann's introduction to Stargate with the initial research program called SCAN-8. This program, meaning Scan by Coordinate, was funded by the CIA starting in 1970. The CIA's remote viewing research supposedly began in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI. There was interest in such things prior, but not a lot of scientific investments. The earliest records that could be found on this sort of thing was a note from 1948 speculating whether hypnotized people would be of use for long-distance communication. Ask Molly 2021. The program's work was conducted by Russell Targ and Harold Putoff. Forgive me if I said their names wrong. The latter previously worked with the NSA and during that time was a Scientologist. Their effort was originally focused on a few gifted individuals such as Ingo Swann, a prominent Scientologist, OT level VII. In fact, many of the viewers were from the Church of Scientology, Pike 2005. The research team at SRI also brought in ex-Israeli paratrooper Yuri Geller for testing, Pruitt 2018. After meeting with and evaluating him, Henning concluded Geller was a fraud. He easily spotted loopholes and inconsistencies in Geller's acts that Russell Targ and Harold Putoff had apparently missed. Hiltz 2021. Do I dare make my hypothesis? No, but I will describe my thought process and allow you to make your own. My immediate thoughts reading this information were wow, jaw literally dropped. My understanding of Scientology is admittedly surface level, a bit embarrassing considering the amount of research I put into developing my understanding of all religions. Regardless, the only thing I can do is work with the information I currently have. That thought process is then expanded upon through pattern recognition of those same behaviors in all other circumstances, in this case, organized religions. Ultimately, the thing I've seen and known modern religion to do best is exploit the vulnerable masses. I'm not saying that this entire thing is a load of garbage, because I do believe in plenty of absurd things. What I mean is that things can be incapable of comprehension and still be tangible. Things like intuition could be boiled down to pattern recognition and faster processing minds, but I also don't want to boil down the magic of the world into something so tactless. So if you do prefer to do so, there is a resource for that. Persinger et al. 2002. In 1983, the original program was renamed the INSCOM Center Lane Project, ICLP. During this time at SRI, Ingo Swann and Harold Putoff, both the Scientologists, developed instructions that were theoretically capable of allowing anyone to be trained to produce accurate data through remote viewing. This method was used on a wide range of targets, both training and operational. In 1984, the existence of this program was reported on by Jack Anderson. Later, the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council evaluated the program and results were unfavorable. Army funding ended in 1985, and the program transitions to the DIA and was renamed Project Sunstreak. I will add there's a collection of, goodness knows how many papers, I did not go through all of them, written by Ingo Swann. Both information and notes on remote viewing and personal papers are in this collection. To gain a better understanding of the case and the man, you are welcome to go through the resource. Fair warning, much of what I opened was in cursive, and if you haven't learned, or even if you have, sometimes the handwriting gets a bit iffy. If you are taking a deep dive into his mind, just be prepared to lose a bit of your sanity along the way. Ingram Library 2022. Alleged warning of aliens on the moon, the far side. If you're a firm believer in the moon landing being faked, I mean no judgment, genuinely, everyone's allowed one favorite conspiracy theory, you'll love this next story. One author asks us to imagine for a moment that the most clandestine program in the US was not shut down due to failure, but rather because they discovered something that was too incomprehensible to share. Author then goes on to mention Ingo Swann, saying that somewhere buried in the archives of the project, Swann described the moon's far side in a series of sessions. Allegedly, Swann said that the moon's far side was permanently hidden from Earth, this being due to towering, unmistakably non-human structures, glowing domes, and mechanical operations that need hidden. The being Swann saw, as he claimed, understood he was psychically intruding. A US official told Swann that these beings told them to stay away and they are not friendly. Ingo Swann then claimed this as the real reason why NASA never went back to the moon after Apollo. Lastly, the writer says that the government has not corroborated nor refuted these claims, which they take to mean there is a possibility. Wellbeing Whisper 2025. Aliens on Earth and Other Planets. Another author on this platform that I wrote on shares one of the remote viewers by name, Pat Price. Price claimed to have seen structures, tunnels, and humanoid creatures working alongside human scientists underneath Mount Hayes in one/some of his sessions. They claimed that he felt unsafe and as if he was viewing something he wasn't meant to see. After disclosing these findings, he died under mysterious circumstances in 1975. The area surrounding Mount Hayes has supposedly reported peculiar UAP or unidentified anomalous phenomena. The writer goes further down to speak on Ingo Swann's visions, providing more information than the previous writer, including his views of Jupiter, Mercury, the Moon, and Mars. Nikita 2025. I wanted to investigate this a little further and found a couple of sources on Patrick Price to try to understand better. The first source states, Price was the SRI's psychic treasure. Price was another high-ranking Scientologist but had no intelligence background. With his remote viewing sessions, he was allegedly capable of locating, identifying, and describing in such detail that it shocked agents. The scientists monitoring Price believed that he had the potential to become the perfect spy because he could move past physical limitations to gather intelligence worldwide. Inman 2025. July 1975, Price quit his position at a coal company and returned to the SRI. On the 13th of July 1975, Price flew from West Virginia to Washington, D.C. and met with people from the NSA and the Office of Naval Intelligence. He spoke with his friend to tell him that he was bringing documents with him and that his friend was to secure and forward the material to put off should anything happen to him while in Las Vegas. But his friend did not know the extent or content covered, which the previous meetings were for. His friend picked him up at the airport and they went to the Stardust Hotel. Headed to the registration desk, a man bumped into Price. Whether this is of consequence is not determined. Shortly after this, he began to feel lousy. He suffered throughout the night, and at 5 a.m., he called his friend for help. Price was coherent and not complaining of chest or arm pain. His friend witnessed Pat convulsing. Paramedics arrived and shocked him to no success. Patrick Price died on July 14, 1975, in a Stardust hotel room in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada, ostensibly of a heart attack, but certainly under questionable circumstances. WikiTree Editors 2025. Keep in mind that the information provided in these sources is questionable when judging the validity of any of these claims. If you're trying to look at it from an entirely logical and scientific point of view, though I'm assuming if you read my writing, you likely come for the crazy takes and all that stuff, so here's what I have to say. This does sound very odd. Often remote viewing wasn't successful to such a degree that it would encourage any further testing or implementation with military operations. However, if this guy was accurate as often as is claimed, it makes you wonder whether the alien claims hold any truth. If they do, then his return and subsequent death do seem entirely more suspect. Now, in between this entirely logical death to alien spectrum of answers, there are more logical answers like KGB or other agents not wanting the military to utilize them again. That's not what you're seeking in this. Maybe aliens did do it, maybe they didn't, maybe they exist, maybe they don't. Maybe you should get a head start on my writing for the future by researching Project Bluebeam, the Cold War. In case you have as little understanding of this conflict as I do, we'll go over over it briefly. American school system for the win. Sarcastic, but we don't have that much time to go over all the flaws. The main reason this program was so humorous and its employment was because it was another attempt at beating Soviet Russia. The Cold War was a conflict marked by geopolitical tension but not direct large-scale fighting. During World War II, the US and Soviets fought as allies against Nazi Germany. Allied powers, Great Britain, the US, Soviet Union, France, and China, National Army Museum 2025, this ideological war was raging for the duration of the Stargate program. Early thoughts, beginnings, and middle stages almost to the end, 1947 to 1991, with Stargate ending in 1995. Specifically, the roots of Project Stargate tie their start to the storm that blew over when a classified document made its way to the US military/intelligence that claimed the Soviet Union was putting money into researching ESP and psychokinesis for espionage. Pruitt, 2018. Espionage is the practice of spying or using spies to obtain information about the plans and activities, especially of a foreign government or competing company. Merriam-Webster Dictionary, Editors, 2019. The American government did some other questionable tests during this time. Marshall Islands, not addressed but briefly mentioned in the source, History.com, Editors, 2009. Syphilis studies, the Green Run, and more. People were just completely expendable. Roberts, 2024. Another reminder, the Civil Rights Act ended discrimination in 1964, and the Voting Rights Act protected rights in 1965. Crosby, 2024. And that didn't even solve those issues because to this day, disadvantaged communities still must fight with gerrymandering, redlining, access to generational wealth building, and so many other systemic barriers. Basically, what I'm getting at is that a few people at the top were always willing to throw as much money and even bodies at the problem as possible if they actually cared about it. The problem here, I mean to specify, is socialism or any other ideology that exposes the flaws within capitalism. Most people conflate any and every form of socialism with totalitarian communism and accept these responses as just and reasonable. The US won, communism was defeated, and the Soviet Union collapsed, but the resounding cries expose endless flaws within our systems throughout the following decades. What did they learn from all of this research? Many different numbers were quoted in terms of the total budget and duration. One source states almost $11 million or nearly $600,000 a year, redacted 1989, yet another source states over a period of more than 2 decades, some $20 million were spent on Stargate and related activities, with $11 million budgeted from the mid-1980s to the early 1990s. Pike, 2005. The main source I was using, as it had specific numbers and budgeting across years listed, led, after dumping $14,875,000 across 15 years of research, some of it being the precursors to Stargate, they concluded several things. The overarching theme was that regardless of any of the use of this research, it is necessary to improve the quality of the results through 4 things. First, you would have to discover and accurately identify which individuals possess skills in anomalous cognition, AC. Second, you would have to build training methods to improve the performance of AC. Then you would have to create protocols to optimize elicitation, drawing out of AC. Lastly, you would need to develop a sensitive and efficient way of analyzing any data surrounding AC. Furthermore, they concluded that 1% of the population appears to meet the statistical criteria for a strong AC ability. They realized that while they've developed training methods, they have had limited success. But none of those receivers, those with AC capabilities, lose any of the ability that they started with. Senate Armed Services Committee, 2005. The reliability of many techniques and operatives was questionable at best. Lewin, 2022. How does all of this tie to the AI project of the same name? Bear with me while I attempt to dissect this conversation. I have very little understanding of financial institutions as well as AI, and therefore am not the most qualified to be giving this talk. However, I understand incredibly well on a personal level how these modes of transportation through which the rich get richer can completely level an already struggling community. The fact that I was able to come out of poverty was only made as accessible as it was because there are significant opportunities available to a person like me. I recognize that the things that I have had to fight for were not comparable to some of the worse off folks that have been systemically held from being capable of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. I also might think that my perspective as being slightly above poverty gives me added insight to break this down, but I recognize that I have blind spots, so without further rambling, Oracle. Larry Ellison, along with Bob Miner and Ed Oates, started Oracle in 1977 as SDL, Software Development Laboratories, a consultancy firm. Larry Ellison, the unconventional billionaire, and his family office, 2025. The company sells database software, Wikipedia Media Contributors 2019, things with this company start to get more interesting when you take to note their start with the CIA. Specifically, Oracle takes its name from one of the CIA's project's code names. In fact, the CIA was Oracle's first customer because the CIA wanted a relational database, Novik 2014. Ellison helped build the surveillance state, yada yada. I know the CIA did terrible stuff. I just don't want to dive too deeply into hypotheticals when the stuff that's out in the open is bad enough. Organizations like that need databases, and while Ellison seems to have some interesting beliefs on what is acceptable in terms of national security, I don't see a glaring comparison here. Perhaps all this research acts to do is build the line or connection between Oracle and the CIA. First, purportedly, Oracle is incredibly unsafe, and that is something to be concerned about. Novak 2014, but everybody knows that the internet is unsafe, and everybody knows that banks and billionaires are pulling one over on us. This information isn't anything particularly shocking to evaluate upon. Let's look at another source. This next article starts off by directly noting the weirdness that Project Stargate was, before telling us that the name has made a resurgence in 2025. The name is tied to artificial intelligence in modern times. Specifically, the new Stargate project is the largest AI infrastructure project in history. SoftBank is going to main financial responsibility, while other initial funders are OpenAI, Oracle, and MGX. OpenAI is going to be managing the operational responsibility with key technology partners including ARM, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Oracle. What they are doing with this project is building the infrastructure to support the next generation of AI technology, meaning massive data centers, hardware, and an energy grid that will be capable of handling the demands of these systems. It appears that this is another attempt at showing the nation's supremacy, as other nations are also investing heavily into AI. Bordaloy 2025, parallels are certainly there in a humorous enough manner. While the name Stargate could bring wonder or amazement, think science fiction, space travel, the truth is that with Oracle's ties to the CIA, that seems incredibly doubtful as the case. Still, this project is said to be getting nowhere and is needing to scale down some of its ambitions. Patrizio 2025. As it stands, this seems like a wasteful investment, whether it be 10, 100, or $500 billion, when so many face poverty, lack of healthcare, and climate change destroying the homes of humans and animals alike. Not to mention, these data centers are being placed in locations where the people don't have the time, funds, or words to fight back, as the last bit of natural resources are stripped away from those who are already suffering most. In our modern systems, I ask, when is enough going to be enough? When we have no more clean drinking water? The earth has given us everything we could possibly need to survive, and we have built incredible things, but we have lost our gratitude. Added personal thoughts. My intent is to remain generally on the strictly logically proven side of information I develop essays on. However, researching this reminded me of the odd tests I vaguely remember taking sometime in 2nd or 3rd grade. It is more probable that it was just an IQ test and I'm trying to link correlation to causation. Regardless, I'll bring my experience to this conversation whether it holds weight or truth, because it humanizes both me and my work to share those pieces of myself. I will also briefly recognize here that my memory of this event is fuzzy, and therefore it holds less weight simply for the fact that it isn't something that I can dig into for any sort of proof. For further proof that I am not trying to bring validity to delusions of grandeur, I found a resource that suggests reading N.A. Jacobson's Phenomena, The Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis. The post brings something in the title that I wanted to share, which is, Skeptics are always pathologically flexible with the truth. That source is, since skeptics are always pathologically flexible with the truth, is there one single concise record that says why the CIA's Stargate program 2019. What I am getting at is that I know there is so much absurdity surrounding this program that it built even crazier claims, and my experience in childhood, while interesting to me, does not point to anything more elaborate or absurd than some potential form of intellectual fostering. Before this happened, I remember multiple instances of my teacher telling me I was shockingly gifted. Who's surprised that the burnt-out former gifted kid turned to art and schizophrenia-fueled conspiracy theories? Anyone? Raise a hand. Just wanted to know, I say schizophrenia very lightly because I know there is a rise in people using that as a joke, haha, I'm so schizo, which seems sort of absurd. When I use these jokes, they're fueled with a fear of knowing my grandma is battling the very thing I have nightmares about, my mother shows serious signs, and I have constant visual and auditory hallucinations. Either way, I always got all my work done on time, showed high levels of empathy as a kid, communicated at such a high level that it didn't align with my skill set. I don't know. I was abused and it made me want to be kinder to the world until it kept beating me down, and I was mean for a long time until eventually I stopped caring altogether, which blossomed into contentedness. I showed developed interest, especially in math and drawing, all of which I was praised for. I remember a teacher or other authority figure coming to my classroom with a list of students that needed to come with them. I remember being asked questions that I couldn't in the slightest comprehend at the time. No, I don't remember these questions, just a strong sense of confusion. I remember intuition tests. I remember, for lack of better word, external rotation tests, which is where you're meant to visualize rotating odd shapes to see how it fits into a puzzle or how it looks flipped, that sort of thing, and puzzles, even timed 3D puzzles. The more I write, the more I remember, and the more I write, the less it seems like a spectacle, and the more it seems like they were just doing IQ or mental capacity tests to analyze the quickest developing minds at that age range. I guess they had not expected the amount of input needed to continue the output of so-called excellence. Whatever those tests were, I hope they gained some valuable insight through taking a dive into my mind's eye. Maybe in the next decade, we'll stop putting so much pressure on children to perform and instead encourage and value the things they take interest in. Summary. Just to recap, the Cold War was basically two countries trying to see whose was bigger. AMP, ESP, psychokinesis, remote viewing, and other such terms for psychic powers were once a somewhat valid claim to covert Operation Fame. Scientologists low-key had some real cool, strong psychics. Though training is unreliable, more probable is that some people have a better reception for processing in their brains. There are probably aliens on Earth, in our solar system, or literally all over. One of the biggest AI funders, has its ties to the CIA during all this craziness. Even crazier, though, is that the biggest attempt at integrating AI infrastructure is literally named after this program. All the while, our leaders invest in goofy stuff like this. We see people die from starvation, lack of access to clean drinking water, homelessness, and other preventable problems that we choose to take funding away from. I say that to say this. History is wild and only acts as a reminder that we must start sticking up for the things we care about now. Maybe I'm sitting here writing this or talking to my friends about it and it serves no purpose. But maybe it motivates one person, and maybe that person motivates another person, it motivates the whole community, and suddenly the dominoes tip one by one until we've made a significant change to where everyone can live a healthy and happy life regardless of the capital they provide. If you're looking for more information on the topic but don't want to go through every single resource, I get it. I've also provided a resource that lists 8 documentaries on the topic. It's okay if you don't learn everything right now. You can watch a documentary before bed to digest things better, or start with a YouTube video. The best way to build your attention span to be able to digest bigger and more complicated topics is one bite at a time. Wait, there might be a good pun there. One bite at a time. 8 documentaries reveal 2024. I hope you enjoy. Of course, all my resources will be in the Patreon and the Substack link in the description. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!